As discussed last week, generative models like GANs and variational autoencoders attempt to capture the distribution of data, most often images, in such a way that new samples can be generated from that distribution. These generated samples are in some sense novel. They do not directly correspond to any of the original training samples, the images or other kinds of data being modelled. They are still a combination of the training data. They represent some smooth space that's learned from those training samples. Using these kinds of approaches, large models like Big GAN and Style GAN are capable of generating high quality, convincing synthetic images of people and scenes that have never existed. So if one were interested and idle and perhaps just a little bit ethically challenged, what might one do with this kind of technology? So computer-generated imagery is nothing new. It's been around for decades and it has become a mainstay of the film and television industries. Fake versions of real people have turned up increasingly in movies, such as the case of the young Carrie Fisher and the alive Peter Cushing in Rogue One. Both of these are examples of high-end Hollywood visual effects. But the technology for such media manipulation has diffused out to many of us in the general public and become available in the era of applications like Photoshop and After Effects. A variety of computer vision and machine learning techniques have been incorporated into these applications over the years for doing tasks like denoising of images. But these are not generally associated in the public mind with deep learning and synthetic imagery. The public awareness of synthetic media with a significant component coming from machine learning and deep learning, or as the media would probably have it, artificial intelligence, probably dates back to late 2017, when the notion of deepfakes started to enter the public discourse. This was when the user known as Deepfakes posted some face-swapped porn videos to some tawdry subreddit, prompting a lot of public discussion. Similar face-swapping abilities and image augmentation approaches have become widely available in the years since then. Many pretty silly, not very high-quality examples crop up as novelty apps on your phone that will turn a photo of you into a cartoon singing a campy rendition of I Will Survive, or that can be used as filters in Snapchat or Instagram. The manipulations performed by these kinds of novelty apps are often actually pretty impressive, but they're not fooling anybody and they're not attempting to fool anybody that they are authentic. And although there's a great deal of overlap in the technologies, these kinds of manifestations of it, which are the ones that we actually encounter very frequently on a day-to-day basis, are pretty much peripheral to the public and media hysteria on the subject of deep fakes. One thing that they have in common is that these are often more collages than purely synthetic media. The things that are produced are usually not entirely synthetic, like the products of Big GAN or Style GAN, but instead they work to combine existing bits of media together. The sort of people that hang around making deepfakes in sleazy porn forums are not really interested in seeing imaginary non-entities who don't exist in these kind of videos. They want to see some simulacrum of Scarlett Johansson or whatever, even if these simulacra of Scarlett Johansson or whatever are really terrible, which they usually will be. The products of face swaps are usually pretty ropey. Their purpose is not to be 100% persuasive. These are a far cry from the slick professional offerings that are the public face of deepfakes. Prominent examples that have brought the notion of deepfakes into the public eye are things like Jordan Peele's version of Barack Obama produced for BuzzFeed, and the alternative Christmas message from the Queen, including a dance routine, produced by Channel 4 last year, and more recently the deepfake Tom Cruise impersonations posted to TikTok. All of these prominent examples were explicitly presented as warnings about the looming threat of deep fakes and how they're going to lay waste to our information landscape, the coming infocalypse where you won't be able to trust the evidence of your eyes and ears and everybody will be out to get you. Not us, of course. You can trust us. Watch our channel, visit our advertisers. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We might cynically observe that often the most alarmist takes on the deepfake phenomenon come from people and organizations whose self-images and business models are predicated on their superior access to and gatekeeping of this part of the media landscape. This is perhaps similar to the notable overreactions to GPT-3 from primarily text-based media organizations. But the most prominent examples, these slick productions warning of the threat of deepfakes, come from these same people and organizations. This is not to suggest that there is something innately untrustworthy in these organizations or that their motivations are in some way suspect. I certainly wouldn't want to encourage conspiratorial thinking about the mainstream media. These are creators and platforms that play an important role in our lives. But the reflexive alarmism about things like deepfakes does seem to reflect at least an unease about potential loss of privileged access and control over these production processes. Despite the spin about being warnings of imminent disaster, first and foremost, these high-end deepfakes are probably best understood simply as entertainment. They are products of entertainment companies and the technical expertise of large numbers of people who produce entertainment products. They are fun to watch. They are presented in prime time. And wild scare stories about how we're all going to be overtaken by AI-driven disaster get bums on seats. This is what media companies do. It's what they are supposed to do. And if they have the minor side effect of sowing suspicion of the democratization of access to media production technology as in some way being a conduit to terrorism, well, who's going to complain about that? But arguably, these kinds of self-serving scaremongering takes on the threat of deepfakes are not harmless. Trust in politics, in media, journalism, and the establishment and institutions is historically terrible. Anti-establishment sentiment and conspiratorial thinking have become a hallmark of political campaigning, notably in the UK referendums on Scottish independence and Brexit, and in recent US presidential elections. Donald Trump explicitly campaigned and governed on a platform of media mistrust, denouncing everything as fake news as a matter of policy. So arguably, the threat of deepfakes lies at least as much in fomenting this atmosphere of general mistrust, this poisoning of the public discourse, as it does in the threat of any individual piece of misinformation or propaganda. As pointed out at length by Britt Paris and Joan Donovan in their influential paper Deepfakes and Cheap Fakes for Data and Society, fake media is nothing new. The camera has always lied. And most of the techniques used now, as always, by scammers and propagandists, lie towards that cheap fakes end of the spectrum. Deepfakes are often really kind of a red herring when you can get away with recontextualization, with editing things out of context, with speeding them up and slowing them down, with using lookalikes, and so on. It's certainly the case that things like Photoshop and Instagram have brought a certain degree of technological democratization, of making available more difficult techniques to more people. But for the most part, the balance of power between those with access to media faking abilities and those who are likely to be victimized by them hasn't really changed very much. If, say, Rupert Murdoch wants to ruin your life will be ruined. If you want to ruin his, not so much. This is not to say that deepfakes in themselves are completely harmless. Victims of deepfake blackmail and extortion and revenge porn, other kinds of reputational damage, can suffer a lot of genuine hurt and hardship. They may lose their livelihoods, they may lose their friendships and their families, they may be disgraced, and in some cases, perhaps as a consequence, suffer injury or even death. In this sense, deepfakes do provide novel opportunities for some nasty crimes. But those crimes are not really novel crimes. It will mostly be the same kinds of terrible perpetrators victimizing the same kinds of vulnerable people. And to a large extent, the evidence suggests that the high levels of convincingness, the apparent authenticity brought about by the technical magic of headline-grabbing AI is sort of a red herring in most of these cases. People are often predisposed to see what they want to see and ignore what they don't want to. The act of seeing with one's own eyes is all very well, but it frequently is trumped by tribal loyalties. Some of the most successful, the most widely shared and readily believed examples of post-truth have put little or no effort into realism at all. Sharpiegate is a notorious case in point. Beyond a certain stage in these kinds of propaganda and information warfare, evidence becomes kind of beside the point. Making the claim is all that matters, and people will believe the claim. Evidence for the claim becomes simply a kind of decoration. So there are all sorts of reasons to believe that the human race might be in a bit of trouble in the years to come, and part of this will come from the enormous flows of information around us. There are really a lot of human beings, and we're not well equipped psychologically to understand that or to be intimately aware of the thoughts and opinions of so many other people around the world. We are frequently credulous and arrogant and territorial and irrational and cruel. We may well be on our way to hell in a handcart, and that handcart will be packed with vociferous denialists insisting that we travel faster and faster. But it doesn't seem very likely that deepfakes will have a significant impact on that, one way or another. Once again, people are the problem.